In this video, I want to update you a little bit about different handheld stitchers. A few disappointments, a few new surprises. My Singer Stitch So Quick, which is battery operated, is still working fine. I am downsizing and getting rid of some of my Sun handheld manuals because they were going to go with quilt sets, and I'm going to be replacing them with Dexters now that I found that there are American-made hand stitchers. So they aren't in the picture right now, but two notes. This I bought brand new Sunbeam. Brand new. I've taken the extra parts off of it already. I decided that I was going to work through these and use them until they break, until eventually I'm using a Dexter too. And I opened it today. I had tested it before. I opened it, I put batteries in it, and it refused to sew. And I knew it's labeled Smart Tech at the bottom. So I just would not buy anything with the name Smart Tech on it. And Sunbeams are Smart Techs. I tried to do some piecing, and the loopers break, and it doesn't make a stitch. So garbage. Don't buy them. Vintage HandyStitch, much heavier. Supposedly, these were the old ones that were supposed to be really good quality, and it is. Except this one, either from sitting there or never being used. I bought it as new old stock. It doesn't work either. It whines, which means one of the gears is having a problem. But then today it did the same thing as the Smart Tech, and the looper will not make a stitch. It's not worth worrying about. I wouldn't buy the cheap no-names on eBay that are like this, that say they're like $7.50 and they do everything. I wouldn't. I would look for either a Dexter that I'm going to talk about, a Singer Stitch So Quick, or a Sun manual, Sun brand manual. That's just my personal opinion. So this one is still working, and that's fine. This is the Dexter that I mentioned in a video already. Now, the Dexter Sewing Machine Company was part of the Grant Company, and late 50s, early 60s, their address, I believe, was before we had zip codes. That's how far back we're going. Dexter Sewing Machine Company, Chicago 14, Illinois. Can you imagine? Do you remember those days? I don't. When we didn't have a zip code? I do remember area codes changing. So here are a couple of versions. This is the earlier version of a Dexter. It's got it's greenish gray, plain green. It's got a nice looper. The looper is plain with nothing on it except the loop, I think. Yep. Comes with this booklet, and usually a needle threader and a needle and a second set of instructions. So by the time they got to this version, this is the whole wing bang wonderful thing. They added a thread cutter. They cut way back on the directions. That's all you get, but you do get a letter from the man who invented it saying, it's that kind of a day, saying thank you for buying, and it's very simple to use. A nice little letter. So the man who invented it, I think they went with all of them, and my first set is just missing it. Thanking you once again, I remain very truly yours, John M. Zuro, President of the company. So this is the second one. Now, I bought this, and this is why I'm highlighting this one. These are wonderful. They do not have automatic feed. You have to pull the cloth to the left as you do it. They do take the old type wood thread spools that are not used today, and their sizing is different from the current 125 yard thread spools. So basically what you have to do with these is use up the thread, find a way to wind thread onto the spool again, and then use it again. I have hand wound thread onto spools like this, and it doesn't take that long. So it can be done. The Simplicity Deluxe bobbin winder, which is no longer made and hard to find, does possibly have the different adapting fitting things where you could wind this from another spool of thread. The normal Simplicity sidewinder, bobbin winder does not do that. So that's the drawback. The advantage is the thread cutter. But the reason I'm showing you this one is because if you buy one, you need to make sure the screw is not cracked. And this particular screw, I've been working on it, so now you can barely see the crack. But the whole tensioning system for this is to loosen or tighten this screw. And there are two, there's one at this end of the spool and one at that end of the spool, flat springs that regulate the tension. But this particular one, this spool knob is stuck. And it's because the stem of it cracked. And so now it's too wide for the hole, and it's really stuck. So I've been working on it. But I wanted the one with the thread cutter, and I'm going to put the camera down in a minute and show you how that works. But so that's the second version with the same brown case that just fell on the floor. And then as they progressed, this is the third version, which is essentially the same as the second version, except they now have, this one says turn a stitch, the other, I've seen others that say dial a stitch. They're probably a little bit later. And again, the thread cutter. Now this thread cutter is sticking a little bit. It needs to be over like that. And this one came with the same simple directions as the second one. A box insert to keep it from moving around in a box. No little nice little brown bag to keep it in. The Dexter Hammer and Stitcher. They also changed the name from the Dexter sewing machine to the Dexter Hammer and Stitcher. Free needle threader. See, use a standard spool of thread and needle. Now the needles are actually the old, I think it's called a 40F, or a white #1 short. They're hard to find. They're vintage needles. I did find some. Depending on how much you use one would depend on whether or not you can figure on needing a lot of the needles. The two people that told me what needle size that was said they're probably pretty rare. But I would imagine that, if I ran out of needles, I would imagine I would be able to find some kind of a replacement. There has to be a modern Singer needle or Schmetz or something that's similar. So there's the third one with the box. Now, I thought I had some fabric here. Now this is kind of thick, a thick piece of fabric, but let me put the camera down for a second and grab a piece of fabric and show you why I like these. So here's just a little piece of muslin. I'll show you with the, no, I want to show you the thread cutter. Okay, so here is the fabric going under, and there's, this one is a little bent. It's bent, excuse me, bent down a little bit. The other one is a little bit straighter, the one with the stuck spool pin. So these are the things you're going to run into when you find them. This is white thread on muslin, but this is how wonderful these are. And then watch what you do. So you're holding it straight, you've got the thread cutter like that. And you know what that does? It locks your seam. It completely locks the seam. Wouldn't you know that the light's too bright to show that? See that? How the seam is locked? So now I'll show you without that feature how they stitch. Now even without automatic feed, it's extremely smooth to use. I have that in the view I do. I'm not really pulling on that at all. Made in America, folks. Now, this is what it looks like when the tension needs to be adjusted. Let me move the camera because it's giving a reflection of some kind. See how I've got two loose loops there? So on this one, which is working, you turn it just a fraction of an inch. And now this doesn't have a thread cutter, so I pull it out from the back to get some, and just basically pull it off of there and break it on the looper. Break the thread on the looper. But once you get, it's just a little piece there, but once you get the tension set for the fabric you're using, they're perfect stitches. You can't see them very well there. And you can tell here that they went to a blue-green with the newer ones, and the difference in the knobs. I think they're worth looking for. In my case, it's because I'm trying to get back to only using things that are made in America. It's difficult. This is one thing that was made in America. And the Dexter sewing machine company and the Grant company both, I believe, went out of business. So there's probably a limited number of them out there. And try not to find, you could ask, if you find one and you want to buy it, I would ask the seller, does the knob work? I would ask the seller if the thread cutter moves back and forth. But other than that, I don't think you can really break them. And the advantages, now those two I have to throw out, the Smart Tech and the HandyStitch, it's because I can't see what it's doing. If I could take those apart and see what they were doing, I could probably fix the looper. And on the older versions, they added a little tension thing here. It's a little wire that you can see in that view. And I think it's a matter of tension, holding the stitch as you pull it apart. So I think you can tell that I'm thrilled, and I already have about 15 thread spools that size. So I'm just going to rewind the spools until I find a bobbin winder that does spools, and use this. The Dexter Hammer and Stitcher handheld stitching machine.